Well, welcome everyone to Drupal 8, What You Need to Know. And if there are stragglers, I guess they can come in. I should say that again. It sounds good for the audio. All right, Ray. Drupal, no, I got it. Okay. One more time. Straight face. All right. Welcome everyone to Drupal 8, What You Need to Know. Now we got stragglers. Uh-oh. There we go. Are you? Okay. Oh, it's loading. That's not good. So I'm Matthew Tift. I am one of the organizers here at the Drupal Camp Twin Cities, or Twin Cities Drupal Camp, as we call it now. And I'm one of the all-volunteer organizers, I might say. I'm also a developer at Wisconsin Public Radio, but I live here in the Twin Cities. So I work for Wisconsin, live in the Twin Cities, and I don't drive there every day. I am also a Drupal core contributor. My first patch got in sometime around April 2010, and that's kind of intermittent. I haven't been working every day on Drupal core since then, but it's been that long. And I know a whole heck of a lot about music and music therapy and music theory, and I'm not going to talk about any of that today. And I did make it out of the Grand Canyon alive, by the way, in case you're wondering. Today's talk, I had a lot of help in terms of getting ideas and having people review my slides, and I just wanted to acknowledge those particular people on this slide. And today is going to be a very high-level overview of Drupal 8, and if you're looking for a place to dig into the entity API or something along those lines, that's not going to be today. I tried to keep the code samples to a minimum to give you just some of the high-level overviews and give you a sense of where you could go if you want to find out more about a particular topic. I'm going to focus on the major Drupal 8 initiatives, which I will discuss in just a second. And I will also talk about ways that you can get involved with Drupal 8 if you are so interested or inspired by today's talk, I am sure. Let's talk a little bit about the timeline. Some of you may know that in January 2011, Drupal 7 was released. So what we're talking about today began development in March of 2011. So when that happened, we officially switched from working on Drupal 7 to working on Drupal 8 and ending Drupal 6. So we've had quite a while to add new features. Almost 2 years, there was a period where people were working on new features for Drupal 8. And that's what I'll be talking about in large part today. Between February and July 1st, so this month, we had a period where there weren't any new features added officially, but we could work on the back-end part of Drupal, the APIs in Drupal, and make changes to those. But now we have reached a period that we call API freeze, and now we are into the polish phase of Drupal. So lots of the stuff that I'm talking about today are features that were added during that first 2-year period. We've cleaned up some of that code in the back end, but there's a lot of polish that needs to happen before we will launch Drupal 8. And we are talking about lots of work here by lots of volunteers and over a fairly big chunk of time. So I'm just going to try and focus on those things that I think are the most important. And I wanted to get this question out of the way right away is, when do you think you moved to Drupal 8? Well, Dries in DrupalCon Portland 2 months ago said 2014. So I think that is, that's a pretty wide time frame, a year. But no, it should be maybe early 2014. I don't know. It could be earlier. It could be later this year if things get done, because we don't really know. This is open source, right? This is when we get down to 0 critical bugs, then we have a release candidate for Drupal 8. And that's how it works. So I'm going to tell you a little about what I think is exciting, and a few other people are going to tell you about what they think is exciting.
Last week, conference Press was in Dublin for the Drupal Dev Days 2013. I asked 30 people 3 questions. Here are the answers to question 1. What is exciting?
Being able to write unit testable code and having a proper unit testing framework to test it with.
The CMI initiative.
Form display modes.
Using core.
Better user interface.
In many systems, there's a lot of care and attention given to making things easier for people who don't already know Drupal.
Multilingual support
Is the new entity API.
The Drupal community interacts now with other open source communities.
Finally, it's becoming an object-oriented system.
The object-oriented stuff.
Using core.
Twig template makes it so much easier for front-enders.
It's the 7th style guide.
Object-oriented architecture.
More separation of more features so we can use them as solemn features and not as a whole thing.
The possibility to have formatters and widgets on properties.
We have a style guide in Drupal 8, which means we can achieve consistency throughout the admin user interface.
Now you can get your nodes out to JSON and XML pretty easily.
Drupal 8 is based on the Symfony stack, which means that it's using some of the ESI and HTTP kernel plugins.
Using core and inline editing.
Inline editing.
The fact that the theme layer and theming is simplified.
Formals just got in.
The configuration management initiative.
RESTful API.
Configuration management system. I really like the language twig.
It's almost done. We're approaching code freeze.
Thanks for watching. Keep an eye on our Twitter stream and on YouTube for the answers to question 2 next week.
All right, we won't get to question 2 right now. I want to just give you a hint of what other people are excited about, just to prove that it's not just me. No, everybody knows there's a lot of people that are excited about this, a lot of people that have contributed, and there's these various initiatives that will help form I guess the structure of this talk. From the mobile, the configuration management known as CMI, there's the HTML5 initiative, there's layouts, which is also known as blocks and layouts, which is also known as Scotch. I'll get into that. There's the Multilingual initiative. There is Views in Core, also known as Views in Drupal Core, or VDC. And there's the Web Services initiative, which is also known as the Web Service Context in Core initiative, or WSCI. So there's a lot of funny terms that we have, and I just wanted to give you a sense in case I throw out one of those terms accidentally. But those are the main 7 initiatives that were sort of blessed by Dries, the creator of Drupal. And in addition to those initiatives, there's lots of other sort of related efforts. Some of these were very successful, even though they weren't necessarily official. And a couple of examples of those include the Spark initiative, which is a Drupal 7 distribution that also serves as an incubator for Drupal 8. And their focus is on the authoring experience and making the usability of Drupal better. And a number of projects that this distribution, or a number of the features that this distribution came up with ended up in Drupal core, and I'll mention those along the way. There's also the Twig initiative, which was very much a grassroots effort and is going to drastically change how people do theming in Drupal 8. So it is a template engine for PHP. The marketing on their website is fast, secure, and flexible, and it means the end of TPL files. So that is a big thing. We have some groans in the audience. So again, I will get into this a little bit more later, but I just wanted to mention that even though I'm going to focus on these main 7 initiatives, a lot of the things come from some of these other initiatives. There is nearly 30 of them listed on this particular page. But you can see it wasn't just these official initiatives. The status of Drupal 8 development. I went back a year ago and looked on archive.org to see how we were doing. These little blue DrupalCons sort of show our progress. And a year ago now, July 2013, here's our current status. So as you can see, here's another way that people are sort of describing their own initiatives in terms of how far they feel they have been completed in these 3 phases of discovery, design, and development. So the first one is the Drupal 8 mobile initiative. And in Chicago DrupalCon 2011, Dries said, if I were to start Drupal from scratch today, I'd build it for mobile experiences first and desktop experiences second. So he clearly thinks that this is a key initiative, and it's been a very successful initiative. It's been an initiative that focuses on front-end performance because there's various studies on how important front-end performance is, or on how much the front-end code affects the page's performance, and people say, generally speaking, from 80 to 90% or more. I've seen as high as 97% is coming from front-end performance. So that's one of the things they were working on with this initiative. John Alban Wilkins, who was in charge of this initiative, started off by working on the documentation in Drupal 8, or in Drupal 7 actually, to have as like a discussion place. Here's how people are working on making sites more mobile friendly, and they had discussions around native apps, responsive design, and that type of thing. So by starting with the documentation, they could sort of flesh out a way to approach this initiative. And as a result, now we, jumping to the end, so to speak, we have 3 themes in Drupal, all of which are responsive. And I think this is a huge win in terms of out of the box. You have Drupal 8 as a responsive design that works well not just on your website or on your desktop, but on your mobile devices. So what problem does this solve? Well, in Drupal 7, I just did a local installation and looked at on this phone emulator thing, and it's sort of difficult to read that, and this is how it looks in Drupal 8. So you can see it's easier to read on a mobile device. Same thing, you might have encountered menus like this on your Drupal 7 sites in the back end when you're doing administration for a site. And now we have these fancy drop-down toolbars, these menus. This is one of the things that came out of the Spark initiative, or the Spark distribution, I should say. The other problem we have with Drupal 7 is adding content on a mobile device. As you can see, well, as you probably know if you've ever used Drupal, that this experience isn't necessarily fun. But now, even creating content on a mobile device will be a much more enjoyable experience in Drupal 8 out of the box. And I think, again, that just seems pretty cool to me. We have these types of things because of a bunch of new modules that are in Drupal 8, obviously, including the breakpoint module, which can help you manage something. You can guess what breakpoints. The picture module, which can help you with your responsive images. But in all of this stuff, as you can see, is in core. So this is stuff that you can do in Drupal 7, right? But you can't do it without installing other modules. So this initiative, they're still looking for help. There is a GDO page, a groups.drupal.org page. There's an IRC channel, an issue tag on drupal.org. And I'm going to give this type of information for each of these slides so you can have it here for reference if this is something that you want to get involved in. There's another sort of unofficial initiative that's related to the mobile initiative that is regarding usability. It's another group on GDO. And some of the things that have come in from this group of folks is the CK editor. And again, you may be thinking, yeah, CK editor, we've used that. Well, now it's in core, thanks to the Spark initiative again. So this is a big thing to have WYSIWYG in Drupal. This is something that many of us kind of, maybe the first time you played around with Drupal thought, really? No little buttons? I have to write everything in HTML? So this is also a somewhat controversial move for a few folks, and picking the right editor and all of that had some, there were some contentious discussions, but it's in. So, we'll see. That's how it's going to be with a lot of this stuff, quite frankly, is there were some contentious discussions around what should be in and what shouldn't, and certain things made it in, and this stuff sort of works itself out as to what stays and what we end up dumping. In Drupal 8, you can still do this back-end form editing where the interface does look a little bit different. There's some usability improvements here, but a huge new feature of Drupal 8 is this in-place editing, where I have this site installed, again, out of the box. I created a node, and right there on that node page, I can edit in place. So there are lots of people that think this is maybe not the right way to go. We actually, one of the keynote speakers at DrupalCon Portland talked about this as maybe misleading certain users into thinking that this is what you see and this is what you will get, and having people play with the site and then seeing it on the mobile device and having it look very different. So I don't want to get too much into that, but I will say that this is a pretty cool new feature, and I don't think a lot of us have had this experience of editing right there on the page before if we've been using Drupal, so I think it's kind of cool. The tour module is a module that is in Drupal core now that is another thing that is supposed to make it easier for people that are new to Drupal, where developers can implement this type of thing that sort of guides you through some of the key features on a page to show you what these buttons do and have these little pop-up screens. This issue is, I think, currently broken because I was looking to take a screenshot of this and I didn't see anything. So there is this patch, and in case you haven't seen how Drupal works this is a issue. Somebody says the Views UI tour is broken, so they made a patch, and other people have looked at it, and the current status is reviewed and tested by the community, RTBC, which means that now somebody who is a Drupal 8 core maintainer has to come by and look at this too and say, all right, yes, somebody wrote the patch, somebody else checked it out, and when that happens, then I have a meeting I got to go to. I'll see you in a little bit. So anyway, I just wanted to make the point that because you can go and download Drupal 8 right now, install it, play around with it, and if you're looking for that tour button, it's not there. You can apply that patch and it will be there. Another great feature is the ability to select multiple files. Again, out of the box, Drupal 8. You can upload these right from your computer, and even having this ability to drag and drop them is something that contentious for some people is a pretty cool feature for lots of users that might be used to that functionality using other services on the web. Question?
Multiple file upload, is it Flash?
No, not Flash. I won't get too much into technical difficulties or descriptions because I will go off somewhere. No. So this initiative is a lot of the stuff comes from the usability group, and here is their information. Configuration management, also known as CMI, is an initiative that is trying to solve a problem that lots of folks have solved in many different ways, which is being able to move your configuration information from your various sites, from your development site to your test site to your production site, or whatever you may call those sites, or some people have lots of testing sites. But there's no good way to do that without, in Drupal 7, because it mixes configuration information with content information in the database. So each module that implements a solution to this does so in a different way in Drupal 7. And again, these things, they have been solved in Drupal 7, and now it is in Drupal 8, where we have a solution out of the box to help with this problem and provide a central place for modules to store configuration data. We have this configuration API, and it's pretty cool. So one example of this would be when you install Drupal and it says, what's your site name? You write that site name, and in Drupal 7, that information goes into the database. And in Drupal 8, that will be now going into on disk. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second, of how that works. It also means the end of functions, and this is for the developers. I have to have some of this stuff in here. Variable get, variable set, these types of functions are now gone, and now it's object oriented. It's using CMI to store variable data. So that's a pretty big difference in Drupal 7 to Drupal 8 in terms of the developer experience. That configuration file gets stored in the site's default files directory. There's actually a number of other directories where this is one example with this system.site.yaml file, and that same site name that I was just mentioning, where in Drupal 7 that would be stored in the database, now it would be stored in that particular file. And then the other big improvement is being able to move this data around and change that. And there are lots of these. This is that one directory of YAML files. And when you move that stuff around, you're not supposed to just change that. I wanted to mention that. In your Active Directory, you change it and you put it into this other directory called the staging directory, but it provides a user interface then to move that from one Drupal site to the other, to move that configuration around, and it's pretty cool. As a result, or as sort of a related topic, the .info files are now all gone in Drupal. They're .info.yaml, so we're going to be seeing a lot of YAML files. So get used to it if you're a developer or a site builder. The CMI initiative, you can see here where you can help out. Another initiative is the HTML5 initiative, which brings all the HTML5 goodness to Drupal 8, and the switch means our default doc type is now HTML5. So that's, again, pretty cool. It means things like HTML5 form elements you can use in Drupal natively, out of the box. The other initiative I wanted to talk about was the Blocks and Layouts initiative, which is also known as Scotch, which is sort of a spin-off of the other initiative, which was called Whiskey. So that's why it has the name Scotch some places. The problem that is trying to solve, or was trying to solve, is this idea of having different elements on a page and having blocks on a page and having things on each page that your site is putting there have sort of different importance. And it was trying to give you more flex, or in Drupal 8, what we're trying to do is this. They called it blocks everywhere. That hasn't quite ended up to be like we had envisioned, I guess you could say. Another problem it was trying to solve is there was only one layout. If you have ever installed a Drupal site, you know that right now, out of the box, you can just have one page layout that's used throughout the site. And this initiative was also trying to solve that problem of being able to do other layouts. Another thing it was trying to solve, which it did solve, which was being able to install multiple instances of a single block on one page. So the solution for this is the plugin API, which replaces all of the info hooks, which is another kind of big deal for Drupal developers. And it really fundamentally changes how developers will extend Drupal, giving them the ability to use reusable code components and using the same API. So rather than me trying to describe this, I guess you can read about this more on the documentation page, which is a work in progress. But there's also a good talk from Drupal 8, or from DrupalCon Portland about the plugins in Drupal. This is the information about the Layouts initiative. As you can see, their IRC channel is Drupal-Scotch. The Multilingual initiative has done tremendous work to make Drupal more usable for people that want to make sites that are not just English sites. The problem in Drupal 7 is it wasn't possible, right? I mean, I'm talking about it in the past, but obviously we're still all using Drupal 7. But I'll say in Drupal 7, the problem is you have to have English. You can't remove English. You have to add to it. and if you want to add to it, you have to manually download translation files. And if you've ever done that, it's kind of a, I don't know, kind of a, it seems like there's lots of extra steps in that just to have a different language. Translations on alt tags and title tags and things like that. That's another tricky problem that this initiative was trying to solve, because in Drupal 7 you need a whole heck of a lot of modules, something like 40 or 50 modules literally if you want to have a good multilingual site, because each of these modules solves a different problem and sometimes in a different way. But now when you install Drupal, the very first thing that you have, the very first setup piece of it is choosing your language. And there's nearly 100 of them available. Once you get going with it, English is optional on your site. It's no longer required. The translation information is automatically imported, so you don't have to upload any files. It's much better in terms of the right to left styling and how the CSS handles that particular problem. And we have an entity translation API, which again will change how developers put information on a page, especially when you want to translate that information, data from fields especially. I don't know how many times you might, as a developer, have written something like field, open bracket, single quote, UND, single, and then you're like, why am I writing all of this stuff? Or maybe the first time you encountered that seemed maybe, I don't know, confusing, insane. Well, thanks to the multilingual folks, that whole process has changed. So there are lots of different ways you can help with this initiative, including a sprint this Sunday in 2 days that we're having at the Nerdery. So this is one of the sprints. It'll be led right by our CT sitting right here in the audience. Drupal 8, views in core, something that people think was a long time coming. Views in core, this initiative was actually born right here at Drupal Camp 2012. I remember it was at the Nerdery. I was sitting at a table with Earl Miles asking him, well, what you working on? And he said, I can't tell you. It's secret. And then, well, then Views in Core was born, and Tim Plunkett was saying that they basically had a working version of Drupal 8 with views, I think that day. He said it was a pretty simple experience to get it going. They did work out all the bugs and whatnot so they could get it into core officially on October 22nd. And this is a pretty key thing, because October was a while ago in terms of Drupal 8 development terms. And what this means is that they've had time to polish up views in core. And follow me here, that in Drupal 7, when that was released, a lot of people said, well, I can't install Drupal because I need views, because all the sites that I use have views. So when release candidate 1 came out for views, then that was they say 6 months, it's closer, well, 6 to 7 months later, we had this lag. Well, then you can see once the release candidate came out, the adoption of Drupal 7 grew a lot. And then once we had another, once we had a stable version of views, then the adoption increased again. So by having views in core, this should help reduce that 6-month lag when Drupal 8 is released, because immediately you have a usable Drupal site. And what does that mean? So having views in core really changes some things that you might not have thought about before. It was one of the first initiatives to actually use this plugin system that I mentioned. So there's a lot of cool stuff going on in the background. It means all views are saved to disk, which makes it very easy, again, to transfer a view that how many of you have spent a lot of time, you work on the view, maybe you've exported it. Right now we can do something like that with features, but this is in core, saving it and exporting it as a YAML file. There it is again, using CMI. We have, in views, we have responsive tables. So views is responsive. I mean, that is just, I don't know, that's just really cool. Views bulk operations, that got in core as well. Views has built-in support for REST and data serialization. I'll talk a little bit more about that if you don't know what that means. But that But that's cool. And your home page is a view. So think about that. You install Drupal 8, there you are, your home page, and edit view. The people pages, the content pages. How many times have you installed Drupal 7 and you wanted to be able to filter content and then you went and made a view to do that? Well, now, edit the view because that's how it comes out default. And to me, this stuff is just like, this is pretty awesome. This is stuff that, why didn't we do this years ago? You know, you may be thinking things like that. So my mind is officially blown, I think. And I think the first time you use Drupal 8, if you haven't tried installing it, you're going to be right there with this guy. So you can still help. There's still a lot of work that we can do to make this better, to polish it up, to help fix the critical bugs. And the last initiative that I wanted to discuss was the Web Services Initiative, the Whiskey Initiative. And it is solving a number of problems. And really, the things that happened in the Whiskey Initiative had much more reaching effects, because they started with this problem in that Drupal 8 is, well, I should say Drupal 7 is assuming that when you say, I want a page, I want node/1, that you want HTML. And that is like how Drupal fundamentally works. And the Whiskey Initiative said, let's change Drupal fundamentally so that rather than assuming you want HTML, we're going to have a REST server, and on top of that is what we maybe now think of as our first-class CMS Drupal. So it's a fundamental difference in how Drupal works, and it uses the Symfony 2. So basically, the short description of this is that we've taken Drupal's core, ripped it out, and replaced it with a bunch of Symfony components. Symfony 2 has all kinds of components. I'm not going to guess at how many there are. I think it's something like 14 or 16. And we've taken, I think, 7 of them. I shouldn't have guessed. Anyway, HTTP kernel is the one that handles these web requests now. And what it means then is, so that same node that you get out of Drupal as a HTML page, you can now get as JSON, or you can now get as, actually you can make your own serialization. You can do all kinds of cool things with this. So another way to think about it is when you have Drupal now, if you wanted to make a Drupal 7 site and then make a mobile application that access the data from that website. Right now you'd use something like the services module to do that. And in Drupal 8, that's out of the box. It means you can build this Drupal site, and then you can build another site that just uses your Drupal site that's actually managing all of the data, all of the content. And it means that a computer can ask your Drupal site for data, and the computer that's asking can then do something else with it. It's not just made for people to consume that HTML on their browser. Along with, this is again one of these things that's sort of related to Whiskey, is that there are lots of different functions that have been replaced with object-oriented code, and in this case, a library, the Guzzle HTTP client library, means the end of Drupal HTTP request. We have PHP unit in Drupal 8. And this has happened because we have something called a dependency injection container, which can help us test our code on the command line. So if you think about that right now, our testing system for Drupal, we have web tests where it basically installs Drupal. It does something maybe you needed to install, users or some content, and then you test this feature. And if you ever use this on Drupal, sometimes it sits there and it can run a lot depending on how many tests you have. Well, with PHP unit, you can add a new feature. It can be encapsulated so that with PHP unit, you can just test your code at the command line. And that is kind of a cool thing, which we'll see how that goes, because PHP unit works in a certain way that if we have procedural functions, well, I don't want to get into that. I'm not going to say this stuff. It works better. It works better when it's object-oriented. So what this means now is that Drupal 8, out of the box, is a web service. That's the big name, that's the take-home point. And there are still things, again, you can do to help with this particular initiative. So there are lots of other really good goodies in Drupal 8, and I just wanted to mention some of them, including Twig, which is the new template engine. It means that tpl.php files are gone. I said that before, I'll say it again, they're gone. It means that we have the end of process layer and process functions that I have here crossed out on the screen. And if you want to learn more about this, I'm not going to say too much because we have a session about it at Saturday right here at this camp. And Jen Lampton and Kotzer are two people that were very, very instrumental in getting Twig into Drupal 8, and they are here and they're going to talk about it. So I'll let them give you more of the details, especially if you're a themer. We have something called PSR0 compatible code in Drupal now. It uses another Symfony component, this class loader component. And what that means is that whether you like it or not, you can now more easily use other PHP code. PSR is a PHP standards recommendations, which means that you write code in a certain way where that, well, these people, this framework writes something that's cool, I want to use this. Now I can use their code much more easily on my Drupal site. There's a lot of technical challenges with that. It's really kind of a developer thing, but it really means let's just all share together a little bit better. And it's great that Drupal is getting in on that action because sharing is good. So we have something called Composer, which we're able to use now that can handle these dependencies when you add the other libraries. So again, it's getting kind of technical, but the main point that you can take away if you're not a developer is that it's going to make sharing code with other frameworks and other PHP projects easier. Internet Explorer, no longer fully supported in Drupal or in version 7, 8, 6, 7, and 8. That's kind of a big thing. If that's a requirement, I think you can still make it. You can still add support back, maybe. I don't know. I shouldn't have said that. Here's a big one. When you install Drupal 8 and you want to add a contributed module or a custom module that you made, you put it in /modules. If you want to install a theme, you put it in /themes. And, you know, we can still do sites all site modules or sites all modules or whatever. You know, you can still do those other directory structures. But I think it's pretty cool that for the common person, they try out Drupal 8, they think, oh, I want to install a module, and you don't have to have this weird discussion about, well, you can't actually put it in that modules folder even though it's a module. You can put it in /modules now, and it's cool. All the core stuff, by the way, is in /core, and then a bunch of other stuff. There's a lot of new code in there. But there's also a lot of new code that's gone. I don't think I mentioned that before. So like all of that code that we used to make that home page, and that's now a view, well, all that code's gone. Same thing for that content page and that people page. There's a lot of code that we could rip out and replace it with other code. And there's actually, quite honestly, a lot of functions that we've ripped out and replaced them with other big libraries that do a heck of a lot more than those smaller functions, which is actually frustrating for some people who have used Drupal for a long time and are very used to those particular functions and how Drupal works. It's really a fundamental change, and I know some people are actually quite frustrated by that. So I don't want to say it's all, you know, kittens and happy for everyone. I do think that I like the way that Drupal 8 is going. I will say that. We have very much improved accessibility in Drupal 8. And again, I won't say too much about this because we have another session. Again, tomorrow, 2:15, Jesse Beach, who has been a very leading figure in the Drupal 8 development, is here, and she will be talking about accessibility in Drupal 8. And then finally, I wanted to mention that all of this code makes Drupal seem very much more complex. The next time you have to write build a form as a developer, and you're realizing, oh my goodness, I can't do callback functions anymore, and I have to do this YAML file, and then I have to write a class, and I have to put it in this, why do I have to have Drupal in my module and forms and this new PHP file? And it seems complex at first. But Anthony Ferrara is a well-known PHP developer who's been helping a lot of the Drupal 8 initiatives, and he's been very skeptical of Drupal 8. I saw him last February at PHP Midwest here in the Twin Cities, and he was thinking, well, I'm not sure if Drupal 8 went all the way in terms of making everything object-oriented and that type of thing. But he looked at it, and he did some interesting research that he presented at DrupalCon Portland, where he looked at the cyclomatic complexity of Drupal 8, which is a method of measuring how complex Drupal is. And he noticed that the general trend is down, that Drupal is getting less complex despite all of these things that we're adding. And he said in his session, I was there, he said that he was quite surprised by that, pleasantly surprised. And then he started looking at other frameworks and seeing the numbers going up, the complexity getting more complex in other PHP frameworks. So there are indicators, at least, maybe you don't believe the algorithms, but that Drupal is actually getting less complex in terms of the code base. And if that's true, that's pretty cool for us, because a lot of these improvements that I've discussed today make it seem like Drupal will be easier to use for your average user. And if it's also more powerful and less complex, well, those would be really cool things if this all turns out to work as I have described today. One sort of myth I have heard people say is Drupal's all object-oriented now, and that's definitely not the case. There's still lots and lots of hooks. We are adopting an object-oriented architecture. We're moving in that direction of making more and more things object-oriented. There's all kinds of issues in the Drupal issue queue, getting rid of procedural functions and replacing them with object-oriented code, which the theory is that lots of other PHP developers and other developers who use other languages that are used to developing in object-oriented way are going to be more drawn to Drupal because at least that part of the code will seem more accessible to them. So if you want to get involved, another way you can get involved that is really awesome actually is core mentoring. It's also run by someone in this room who I'll stop embarrassing, because Tuesdays and Wednesdays on Pound Drupal, you can hop into that IRC channel and you can just say, I want to try and help out with Drupal core, and they will hook you up. They will point you to a website. They will assign you a mentor. They'll say, what do you want to work on, data, or do you want to work on, do you want a front-end developer? Do you want to help with documentation, whatever it is? And then you can get your code, your words, your improvements into Drupal 8, and that's a pretty cool thing, I think. And there's people there that are willing to help you. And we're also having a sprint on Sunday, and that is one of the sprints where we will be having people that will help you here at Drupal Camp Twin Cities on Sunday in 2 days at the Nerdery to help you with Drupal core. Or if you want to help with the Twig initiative, we have, I mentioned Jen Lampton and Kotzer are here, and they are here to help with that. If you are interested in the media module as well, which isn't specifically Drupal 8, we do have another sprint there, but we have all kinds of sprints going on. The core sprint, I should say, if you've ever installed Drupal and used Drupal at all and you have a laptop, you can come and somebody will be there to help you. I think sprints are awesome. I think whenever I go to sprints, I get a lot out of them because I'll try and sit next to somebody who's really smart. I'll look at what text editor they're using. I'll look at how they have things set up. I'll ask them questions, and it's kind of cool just to be able to say, I'm working on this patch, and have them be extremely grateful when you help them out, and then they help you out and you learn something. So in addition to that, the Nerdery has all of this food and breakfast bar and pizza and this huge fridge full of Red Bull and pop and all that stuff. So you can be... Oh. Nice. Come and find out. That's all I have for today. Thank you very much for coming, and I'm here to answer questions. We have about 15 minutes. Yeah, moving sites from Drupal 7 to Drupal 8 will definitely, it's going to be a process. If you have a site that uses mostly contributed modules, for example, or doesn't use a lot of contributed modules in Drupal 7 to Drupal 8, I mean, there is no upgrade path. There are going to be people that try and help make that process easier, but it is going to be it's going to be a tricky thing. I mean, especially if you have contributed modules that the modular developers don't upgrade right away. So this is always sort of the issue, is depending on how you are with code, depending on what type of team or what type of place or what type of site we're talking about, there's going to be a huge range of answers to that question. I think there will be some sites maybe that you could fairly easily move to Drupal 8, but I don't think it's going to be an easy process, even for some of the simplest sites, unless you just have like a few pages or something like that. Yes. I mean, so example, say you're using Drupal Commerce. I mean, that's a big project, and moving. So first you say, okay, yes, we have Drupal, we have views, but I need Drupal Commerce. Okay, well, Ryan is on the ball and he has Drupal Commerce ready on the first day. Well, then there's how many Drupal Commerce contributed modules. So then you sort of rely on those module developers. So it really is going to depend on the complexity of your site, the number of modules that you rely on, and how much you're willing to fix on your own. So we heard that in the keynote this morning, that at phase 2 they have the staff where they could say, well, this isn't quite ready, but we're going to do some fixes here even though the modules aren't ready. If that's your situation, well then you jump right in and help out and help others too. So I hope that's helpful, but it's not. That's a great question, and it's a lot of different answers to that depending on the size and complexity of your site. Yep. So I mean, traditionally, and I don't know if there's an official line or something I'm supposed to be saying about this, but a lot of the bigger sites, they might skip a version of Drupal, because once Drupal 8 is released, then we'll drop support officially for Drupal 6, and then we will continue to maintain support for Drupal 7 and Drupal 8. So you could theoretically wait all the way until Drupal 9 and then make the switch then. So if you have a Drupal 6 site now, it's probably going to be a good time to switch to Drupal 8, and it's probably going to be, if you built a Drupal 6 site when, before Drupal 7 came out, then maybe it's time for you to reevaluate your site anyway, and it's going to be a big project. You're going to have a data migration and that type of thing. So it's never. I've done a lot of 6 to 7 Drupal migrations, and I know those can take time. They really vary in complexity. A blog is sometimes easier, because if you can just export everything as RSS or something and then import it again in Drupal 8.
I know it's hard, but I haven't done it. Anybody, if I'm going to join a group to help out, I want to join a group that helps out with that. When I started Drupal, the first thing you do, it said, I never upgrade because we only get punished for upgrading. And I found that that's true. I wrote an update to a module and suddenly things break that I totally didn't anticipate. And I'd like to help work on that part.
Yeah, when we had Drupal 7, we had a module that helped with that process that somebody built. I can't remember who built that, but it was supposed to help sort of test your upgrade and to get a lot of the work done for you. And I don't know, honestly, if there is an effort like that yet. I think it probably won't happen until we get closer to having a more stable version of Drupal 8. Yeah, I'm sorry I can't answer that, but There are other people around here that can answer that for sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think before we can get to that place, we need the contrib modules themselves to be on 8 before we can make the helpers use the site, right? And in the coder lounge these days, and also at the sprint on Sunday, there will be people there who will take anybody who might want help with that and help define the contrib module and begin the migrating process of that contrib module. And it doesn't have to be your contrib module. You can pick anyone you want and just start migrating 8, get that ball rolling, so that it's fast.
Yeah, any contrib developer, I'm sure, would welcome that first patch that says, hey, I tried to convert your patch. And in that process, yeah, well, I don't want to get into that process, but it's complex. So if you want to help, though, yeah, there are people here to help with that. That's awesome. That's a great point. Any other questions? Well, thank you very much for coming.